we're media artists because that covers film, it covers installation, it covers, you know, theater that has media
Drawing.
in it. But yeah, Sean was a painter and he's got paintings and drawings over at our studio too in the other room outside of the projection. So, you know, that's kind of his background. So I think a lot of times video, it's
Theater.
very much like a painterly kind of expression. But then he also has a background in theater as well. So like, you know, experimental theater, worked with the Wooster Group for many years, if people know the Wooster Group, kind of one of the big stalwart downtown theater companies. And my background, maybe a little bit like yours, is a little bit more music. So music and then editing. And so the kind of time-based stuff, I think we both really gravitate towards. But, you know, even with, again, whether we're working on a documentary film or we're working on a theater piece, it all feels kind of the same to us. Actually, the genre. So I think that when we are in a space and we have, oh, we have a sculptural element and we have a performer, we have media, they all kind of really coalesce to become part of the same machine. Because too, also too,
Yeah.
like everything, the media is very live processed in our work. So Sean and I are performing and we're manipulating images in real time. And like especially that first piece, Keep Your Electric Eye on Me, that we showed, that was four of us, two performers and Sean and I. We were like a little band. In fact we called that an album. Like there were different tracks. And so like this, there were the 13 tracks, and every night we would just try to like replay what we had set up. And sometimes the
We built
performers
the
could make,
score, as you
yeah.
say you do. We built a very intricate
But
score
then there was room in
over
there
months.
to improvise.
And it was too hard to play. You know, if you do it, if you like break it down and do it in rehearsal over a period of 5 hours, you get really good at it. But then it's showtime, and you have to make all those elements happen in real time right now because the audience is in their seats. And then it would be beyond what we were capable of doing. But then again, you end up with something else. So we started with that piece with the sound. Actually, we made kind of 13 tracks of sound that then we would play live while we were operating live cameras, and there were two performers. And yeah, it was just like this complex piece of music that we tried to nail every night, but there was no way to do it.
Sounds so stressful.
It's stressful.
I
And I
was
think
really
that
stressed all
kind
the
of
time.
came out of we were in a period where we were making a lot of installations and films, and then you show them and there's nothing to do. And it's like, I wanted to go back to my live theater past and be like, okay, people bought their tickets. Again, they're in their seats, and you have to make this happen right now. And I love the panic and stress of that. But then it does almost kill you in some way.
Well, there's always that one little extra piece of technology that, like, what if this could happen? And I always feel like it's like that literal house of cards. Like, if we add this one little extra like button to trigger this thing, is that going to make it all fall apart? Like,
how far can we push it?
Yeah. But I was curious with you then, how you kind of approach. I really love.
Can you also hear Sean and Lauren?
No, only you, Zara.
I can translate their question.
Go in with the score built and
Yeah, I've done it in different ways. Their question was about scores and how I handle scores and work with them. Yeah, how I work with scores. I've done it different ways. So when I've done some with audio tracks, which I sort of briefly described in the video, where I just have a series of commands, basically, and I put, step up, step back, breathe out, move object to the left, sigh, look to the left, these sorts of things. Yeah, and then I have you know, I time that out with all the other performers if they're more than one, and then make these separate audio tracks, and then I can hand them to the performers, and without much rehearsal at all, because the directions are very simple, they can it can happen in the space. And I haven't done it this way, but I mean, it would also be possible for basically anybody to walk in to the performance and just pick up a part, because it's very simply done. But, so I like these very simple gestures, very simple individual gestures that together, if orchestrated in a, you know, in a multiplicity or with strange objects or other surprising elements, can become, you know, more interesting than very mundane gestures. But I guess scores have also just been a way for me to think through movement, and think about time. You know, because I've spent a lot more time working with still objects, and there's no duration. You know, they sit in a space, and anyone can spend however much time they like with them, and maybe you discover something. But to be able to control time seems like just this really exciting element. And what do you do with it? And so I've been kind of using the scores as to understand duration and movement sort of as a collage, and then some are more thought through and complex than others.
I love that with some of the objects you have, though, there's so much built-in possibility. You know, like I think that from what I've seen in the documentation that I've seen so far on your website, that it's like, even if it is an object, they do call for some kind of interaction, you know, and then like those little kind of things you're cutting, and then stuff oozes out of them, but they look like they want to be cut. Like there's like a certain, you know, design term, but affordance of them, that like there's a way that I feel like a performer wants to interact with them. So I'm curious, what comes first? Do you think that the object, or you think like the performer, the possibilities come after you see someone, oh, this is what they want to do with it? Or is it kind of organized from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know sort of what I gravitate towards, certain textures, and like, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was your relationship to narrative, because when I'm working in a durational way, there's often some sort of progression, but I find myself almost distracted by just the visual, by the textures, by the processes of opening something and seeing what's inside, and the object itself, the colors, the shadows, you know, all these really visual elements. And now I'm forgetting your original question, but narrative or some sort of arc often kind of falls to the side, and then I need to push myself to, if I want it, to focus on that, because I'm so invested in the texture on the outside of this sphere that I've made, and what it looks, that it's like slightly shiny on the inside, and it has to be the perfect amount of liquid, and you know, all of these details, and I can get so caught up in that. Because one of you mentioned texture earlier, and there's so many great textures in your video, and I mean, there's so many, it's just like an explosion of visual visual elements. But what is your relationship to narrative, and how you let the visual elements kind of take front stage?
Narrative, if we're doing something that has a hint of a narrative, is really only one component, and it's not ever more important than anything else. In fact, if anything, it often recedes. We're always after a kind of atmospheric, strange tone and tension, a kind of psychological, psychic vibration that starts to lift off in a way that it seems like we're happiest if it gets somewhere that we didn't know it was going to go there. And then we find a way to push that a little bit further. But yeah, just going back to like textures, and because we have live cameras, we're obsessed with the skin of a piece of fruit, and that becomes the narrative at that moment. The piece I think we showed a little bit of at one point, a performer, we had someone custom make for us this green candy, and it was, the whole process was made, and it became this crystalline, beautiful, see-through, almost toxic looking candy that was eaten in the show, but it was all over the stage, and it was all over this kind of science table. And at one point, the main dancer smashes it up and put her face in it, and it was all over her hands. And it's about this transformative moment. But the candy kind of led the narrative. We didn't need to push a story more because that said everything we wanted to say. And that was this sort of Jekyll Hyde based narrative, but it was about this transformation into someone else who's either a monster or totally free.
But I think the most narrative thing we've done, though, was this Why I Always piece, which sort of few moments of it was based on Godard's Alphaville, the film. But so that one, like, we started with the script from the film, and we were like when we get stuck in rehearsal, like, well, I don't know, just read the next page. I don't know. Whereas the other piece,
we had a story to go back to all the time.
Even though the film itself is not extremely narrative, if you know this Godard's Alphaville at all from 1965, it's not exactly the most narrative.
It's like a
film.
Sci-fi noir genre film that he made very cheaply in 11 days, and it still holds up as kind of this brilliant look at the future.
But he doesn't care too much about narrative.
But it's like there's big jumps in narrative, because again, it's like, oh, I'm more interested in the way this bathroom mirror looks. And so I'm going to spend a long time looking at this person's face in a mirror. So we kind of took those cues.
That piece was really an attempt to take our style and tie it to more of a story. It's a little bit of just like a sci-fi kind of rescue story, a little bit. People fall in love and they go off together in a very broad way. But it was because most of our other kind of theater pieces are like thematic. Like, this is kind of a Jekyll Hyde piece about transformation. And then the moment to moment, it's like making a painting or making a dance piece. It's like, well, the movement is right, or the motion is right, or the feeling is right. We need to bring it up now, and then we need to bring it down, and then we,
something has to explode. It has to get insane.
Angry, because so the one piece, like, we have dance reviewers come, and dance reviewers are always like, it's great, and then theater reviewers are like, where's the story? So it's like,
it's this whole.
Yeah, but that's interesting though. What different disciplines expect of your work,
right?
And depending on what you call it, it's it's either successful or not. Like, it's groundbreaking or it's mundane. Like, depending on what you label it as.
It's the same thing as this world that we created and made, but fascinating how.
Hey, Sarah, you're still muted.
Oh, we are trying to figure out technical stuff. Because Lauren and Sean are gone.
But now this is a live performance. Like, if you run into some of that genre stuff.
Yeah, the disciplines. Oh, for grants, yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like, how do I explain myself?
Right.
It involves this convergence of all these different forms.
It's tricky, and I don't think it should at all be a factor, and I think it's useless, and I think it's becoming less important, and hopefully that continues. But Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm only interested in the separation or the labels of different disciplines just to find the just because of that question, what it's called and how it's seen in the perspectives, and then trying to stay in the gap between as many as possible. You know.
Yeah, no, Chandra is happiest when we have a film going and a theater piece and an installation all at the same time.
And how they feed into each other. Like we'll be making a film that really doesn't have anything to do with theater piece making, but it is amazing how you can find things that connect to each other and inform each other.
I mean,
I'm always happy to working across platforms.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question, but nobody will hear your answer.
Again, about looking at many of the objects, and I'm curious, like where are you thinking about the piece and what objects you might need, or do you make objects and then they're implemented into the piece? Because they look like they could have so many multiple. They look like torture objects. They look like they could be cooking tools, instruments. They could be played, poked, but you know. And there's something I find great about that. And I'm just curious where you start with that.
I've done it in different ways, but I guess currently I'm most often making objects for a specific piece to be interacted with in a very specific way. But the elements that are involved in making the objects, I often start before I have any idea, like building. I think I think my creative brain is most healthy when my fingers are working on tiny things over and over and over again. You know, so like my body is really busy and I feel like I'm being productive and I know I'll use all the elements eventually, but it somehow, I guess we need to start wrapping up. I get a sense of what the object can do by making those initial elements. But then I'm making, and often the objects get destroyed during the performance. So then, you know, they have a certain lifespan, which I kind of enjoy too, that they exist for a certain purpose. Their purpose has been fulfilled, and then either they take on a totally different form or they've done what they needed to do.
You can just give them what we're up against every day. You know, with COVID, I began to look at some of your work, and even the shapes of the objects look like viral almost, and with these spores and things like pods and charred vegetables. So it looks like a science lab where some type of vital experiment is needing to take place. And there's something I really loved about that. And obviously it takes on more weight even right now, given everything, hearing about all these labs out there trying to make a vaccine and looking at people often in a very white space interacting with a dead fish or some weird cupcake looking spore shape. Yeah, and there's something I found very exciting and impactful about that.
Jack, do you come back and sign off, or?
Yeah, I'm coming back on right now.
Are you in Paris, Jack?
No, that's Milan.
Oh, Milan.
Of course.
Oh, guys, thank you so very much. And I'm so sorry for all the tech problems bashing around over there. I wish we had more time, but we have to stick to the schedule just because of the boat leaving, the last boat leaving, and the last interview is kind of very close together. So yeah, guys, it was amazing. You guys clicked so well, and thank you for the insightful talk. It was
We have so many more things to talk about. We've
So
just
many
yeah,
more
I have.
questions.
Well, that's the thing is, you guys
So
can just go and
perhaps
talk by yourselves. You're right next to each other.
we should you know, we should film some little conversation and upload it to your site.
We don't have to be part of this. You guys can have your own moment.
We can talk by ourselves.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. And so just coming up next for everyone, we need to take about a 10-minute break probably. And we're going to have Joseph Morris and his partner, Alexandra Goldberg, and Sam Sundias. Oh, they're from Harvest Works, sorry. And Sam Sundias from Foreheads will be speaking with them. And it's going to be a good conversation. It's actually one that Sam Sundias specifically requested this. So very early on in this process of setting these up. So yeah, please stand by, and I'm going to show a quick video that Harvest Works sent over, and then we're going to go on mute for a little bit, and but so we'll see you all very soon. And again, thank you so much. All right, everyone. So I think that we will be back on very, very soon. And in the meantime, I'm going to go on mute and Hey, everyone. Welcome back. We're pretty close to being ready. I'm really excited about this one. I was thinking about this one for a while, this talk, and I'm very psyched. And again, just for those of you that are joining now that haven't been on before, the way that this is working is I'm going to be introducing the artists, playing two videos, one each of each person, and then they will talk, just have a conversation, and you guys can ask questions. So if you want to type it in the Q&A or in the comments or the chat, either way, and then either they can address it directly or I can ask it to them if they miss it. So right now we have Joseph Morris and Alexander Goldberg, and they are with Harvest Works, and Sam Sundias, and she is with Foreheads. Go Foreheads. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves and
Hi there.
hey everyone, how's it going over there?
Good, good. Can you hear us okay?
Oh yeah, we hear you great. So thank you, and we've worked with Foreheads has worked with Joseph in the past, in one of the dingiest, craziest spaces that we've ever shown on Governor's Island. That walking into it, you just have dirty hands and dirty face, like walking into this space. There's this old kind of wood shop thing that it was amazing what you
Actually,
did.
twice I've shown with you guys.
Oh, that's totally true. Yeah. Up in the
they were
attic,
both really dingy.
Yeah, that's what we specialize in, is dingy. We do dingy well. I mean, I think everyone on the island does dingy well. You kind of have to work around that, though, which is funny because there's no running water to wash up with, so it's great to work dirty around here. You just stay that way all day. So I am. Do you guys want to say anything about your videos before we start?
Yeah. Who's going first? Is it us?
You're going first since you're right there.
Cool. Yeah, we figured we'd just introduce the video since there's no voiceover or anything. Alex is going first in the video. So do you want to talk about the just real quick what we're showing?
Yeah, so the first thing you'll see is some performance work that I recently shot on the island. And that work, in that work, I make garments and they represent interior emotions or things going on internally. And then the performance is about transforming that and moving through it.
And then we're going to transition to my work, and we're going to see some work with glass and sound, where I'm activating wine glasses and using their resonance electronically. I'm making them resonate like bells, almost like if you were to move your fingers over the lip of a wine glass. And we're going to see a little bit of my work making glass, using glass as a sounding instrument. And then it ends off with some of the collaborative work that we're doing on the island with electronics and biosensors, but we'll talk about that after the video.
Excellent. All right, I am going to put on your video first. It's Joseph Morris and Alexander Goldberg. And Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I love the work so much, and it just fits together so well. It's kind of like Joseph's work is so gigantic and does these delicate things, and Alex's work seems like delicate and does these big things, you know, like you know, these little things just project everywhere, you know, and where Joseph is gigantic and it's just these delicate, beautiful sounds and movements.
Thanks, Jack.
So I'm going to be playing Sam Sendius, resident at Four Heads Residency on Governor's Island. I'm going to play her video now. Uh-oh. Sorry about that, guys.
I buried my mother while she was still alive, in a casket of silence and avoidance. While she kept company with others, I listened to her through letters and recordings. Though her blood was still warm, I held my own hand for comfort and touched the decades to come on my paper skin. I remembered her in strands of blonde and white hair on my head, and thought of her in moments I'd have shared had she not died living. I told our story in the past tense to others, though she longed to hear my voice, and her heartbeat still echoed in her ears. There's a kind of haunting to a lot of my work, a self-haunting that we take into the world, whether it's complicated grief or lingering trauma or mental illness. These things are essential parts of the human experience, but they're also so deeply personal that we're forced to live them alone. It's not unlike death, in that it's as common an experience as being born, and yet it leaves us so painfully isolated. Sewing is an integral part of my work. I think I'm drawn to it as a contradictory relationship. The thread connects while the needle destroys, a kind of unspoken collateral damage. Using my own hair in pieces forces a confrontation with the desirability, mortality, and external governing of our bodies. It's an undeniably powerful medium, and it holds so much personal meaning. As I work, I tend to think, this strand of hair looks like my mother's, this one like my father's, this one shows my age. My art sits in a place of unresolved conflict and intergenerational pain, which I think ultimately makes it also about resilience. How resilient we have to be alive with so much history written into our DNA.
Amazing. I love that line, and I kept on going back to it. That the hair connects well as the needle destroys. Was it? It was. I'm like, all right. It's one of those things that it's obvious, but I never thought about it that way, and it's now gonna like stick with me every time I sew something. Yeah, that was really, really great.
Thank you.
So again, for those of you joining us, there's going to be kind of an artist talk now. But if you have any questions at all, just let us know. And so I'm going to back out of here and let you guys to it. So yeah, Samson Diaz, Joseph Morris, and Alexander Goldberg.
Hey guys.
Oh, this is coming off. Yeah. I don't need to hear myself.
Go for it.
Thanks for the awesome intro, Jack.
That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
My pleasure.
And that poem, I want to hear it again later.
Okay.
Like dig into it a little bit.
Yeah. It's a fresh one. It was my partner's idea to include it in the video, which shout out to him because he really put a lot of work into making that possible. But it kind of touches on some of it ties together a lot of different components of my work. I feel like, so it felt like it had a good spot in there.
Do you feel like the process of making the work helps the words come, and then you write the poetry after that? After the work has come, the visual work has come through?
Yeah, it's funny because I usually think of it as like a separate thing. Like it's like I do like the poetry like in my spare time. It's like in some ways a lot more personal, and like it's only after that I'm like, oh, well, this looks like all this other fucking work that I'm making. So yeah.
It's interesting when you have the poetry and the written word in relationship to the artwork, and it's still an art piece. It's like, you know, when we read things, it's you respond to it differently. If you're looking at something, you're observing and it's on the outside. But when you read things, especially, it's one thing to hear the thing read to you, but it's another thing to read the poetry yourself, because then it's internal, and then it's like you're inside someone's head, and something, and it's the sort of feeling and sentiment and relationship between being internal and reading the poetry and then seeing the work, and it's a nice relationship. So it was a lovely video. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, way to go, Remy. Yeah, it's true. Like as I've like started trying to like record some of the poetry, it's a different discovery. Like it becomes like a totally different thing.
Is that something? Sorry. So it sounds like it's like kind of part of your practice, the poetry, but like it's not as visible as like, do you share it often? Is it when you have your work in like if you were to have the studio, like open up the studio and have this as a show and people seeing your work and flowing through it, is that something that you would sort of open up to the audience to experience, or do you keep those separate?
That's a super good question.
Seems like it's starting to become a part of it.
Yeah, it kind of, well, it was at the root of some of the work that kind of brought me into my current artistic practice. I was doing these embroidering found garments with like short texts. I called them Father's Day gifts for self-aware narcissist dads, and it was like this idea that you would like present like a present to someone with whom maybe you had a toxic relationship, and just sort of like trying to reconcile like this like these internal feelings with outward desire for a relationship. And so there was like a shirt that said, I hate women more than I love you. Or a tie that said, your autonomy is a betrayal. Like these kinds of like, sort of like how there's still something, how we still like save places in our hearts for these like ultimately like toxic relationships. So it kind of, that came from a very personal place. As I was doing that, I started writing more poetry, but I haven't fully thought through how it connects like before this video as much. So it's been a cool experiment already.
I actually also have a lot of writing in my practice, and
Yeah.
it comes in a loop like it's a feedback loop on the work as the performance is happening. The words come and then the words inform the next thing. Some of the pieces have text in them as well, and some of them just it's almost like the artist statement, but it's a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
I feel like it recontextualizes the work in a way that the artist statement just inherently doesn't, because of the sort of language I'm used to seeing and reading these things. So it's more abstract, it's more loosely based. It's definitely much more personal. Where you know, it's a way. Maybe it's a way also out of the artist, right?
Yeah, and I wonder, like for you guys, if this is a thing, because you also do work that's like very like based in like emotional and like emotions and like physiological like manifestations of emotions and everything. But like sometimes it's just like I feel that the balance of like how personal to actually make my work is like a really tough one to find sometimes. That like a lot of times it almost like yeah. Sorry. No,
Sorry. I think we just need to be holding this up, maybe. Can you hear us now?
Are you asking me?
No.
Oh, there's
text.
the people are chiming in.
Oh.
You can hear us.
I think we're on the wrong mic. There's like 3 mics connected to the computer right now, so let's just select the right one. How does that sound? Okay.
It sounds great.
Oh, awesome. Great.
I'm gonna switch with you so we can be internal.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, everyone.
This is the reality of living through a pandemic and making art and being virtual.
So we were talking about exposing our emotions in work. And Sam, what were you saying? You were saying you can't. Oh, we can't. Just me.
Yes. You can keep the voice.
We'll go back and forth. You were saying that you sometimes struggle with how
much to like divulge in like these very personal things. Do you know what? I have a good question for you guys that I would rather ask, and like I think that like this is part of it. Am I trying to like keep tabs on the whole mute unmute thing? I think like a thing that really draws me to your work is this like dealing with like this emotional space. And what I think is kind of funny is like for me, like a lot of my stuff is like stuck in like these complicated emotions and like this lack of closure, and like how do you continue to like carry these things throughout the world. But I feel like what I've seen in your guys' work is like it's a lot more processing things. It's a lot more like really like moving through stuff and like finding a way to the other side of how to expose like the physiological elements of those emotions, or like what that means. And I guess I'm just wondering how you think about that in your work.
Start off.
Sure. For me, I think after many years of struggling with that, like how much do I show, how much do I not show, will it not be taken seriously if I show a lot of it, I got to the point where I realized the purpose of the work is to do the transformation. And so if I'm not like without the transformation, like it is there for that. And I think that that's where it got progressively more like the movement came in and kinetic things, because it helps the visualization of that transformation, and it like leaves room for change within the work, which then happens in the life experience too. Like it's almost a mirror for it. I think that that's also where textiles came in for me as well, because they're so able to transform in that way. And so it went from there, and like, even just like a curtain, how a curtain can move. And I see that in your work too, with pieces in the kitchen. And so I see that happening in that work in a way.
Yeah, and then sort of my work, the way it kind of relates to emotion is very much in like sensation and creating these situations that are meant to generate some sort of affect in the viewer, and they're oftentimes very much related to the body and the breath. And lately, it's been related to like the spaces within our body. And so, to sort of Jack's point of like creating these like big structures that talk about these very tiny spaces and our sort of relationship with those physical, those sort of physicalities of things that are able to travel through our bodies, but that come from very, very far away, or the real physical space of us in relationship to an architectural space. And all the while I do this, I'm trying to create a situation that is novel and feels sort of like filled with some sort of sensation. And then I think, I don't know, like how do you think we sort of cross paths and got into?
Yeah, there's something happening with those two things. Like when you said the architectural space, and then Jack's comment about like the work being like large in the space, and then this detailed thing, we're coming from like different scales almost. And then also I think like, I just lost what I was going to say about that, but in that like coming together of different scales and like the detail and the macro, I feel like that's like acknowledging that all things are changing, like all things are always changing, like the environment always has something moving through it, some kind of change. We have that. And so like kind of in a sense, the only constant is change. So if you're not transforming, then you're like kind of fighting the reality of it. But then I think in us coming together, it's sort of like, how do those different elements influence the ability to transform and change? Maybe, do you think that?
Yeah, I'm absorbing it all. Yeah, something that you said about like the movement and the sort of idea of being kinetic with the work. And I think there's also some overlap between your sort of Medusas when you were showing it to us earlier, watching it kind of like float in and out. There's a relationship to the body, the human, and how we see and perceive things when they're a physical form, and when they move and they just capture your attention, it's almost that much closer to being like to affecting us and to being more present in our perception. And I think that's also probably in part why why these aren't prints and why you're not digitally making your work. You're using your hair. There's like a residue to it, and like physical residue, but also the emotional weight to it that is present if you can like, if let's say you like photocopied it and printed it out, it's present with the story there. But when you see it in reality, like I haven't, it's different. It's just different, and you respond to different. Like I was on your website earlier and looking at the works of the toasters and the domestic objects with the hair growing out. I'm like, oh, cringe.
Yeah, you should see the people experience them like I am. The cringe is real.
I think I also like about that comment you made about the destroying and the, what was the word you used? Like you're destroying it and creating.
That the needle destroys while the thread connects.
Yeah, that in itself is a transformation. Like you're showing one thing and something else is showing up. And so like part of me is thinking that there's like the thing that's left is the artifact of the transformation that happened, even though it doesn't look like it looks like the past, like yours. You can now look at it and see the perception of the past instead of the where it was or something. But I think I find the process of making the things really interesting for that, and the way you talked about the needle and thread. And then I think like also with the tree piece, that has a process in it that is making and destroying, because while making it, you know that you're going to get rid of it, and so that itself is like a blow up of that sewing in a way. which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and no, and someone pointed out too, like the fact that I use the charcoal also. So it's basically using burned trees to try and make this tree that's like emblematic of like a lot of the. I think about a lot of the trees that were like lost on the island and everything, and like all of the transformations that it's had. And so I started to do that. So yeah, it's true. It's like very like losing and creating, yeah, as part of that transformation. Yeah.
Creating. There's a question there. Greg.
Oh, yeah.
How has the island affected your creative outlook or deeper into your work?
I actually wanted to ask you that about how being in a space that was made to be a domestic place and people, a family living in it at one time, and now you're kind of living in the remains of what that was, how that's affected this work that seems to have so much connection to domesticity.
Yeah, it's wild. Like it's really like it's really it's a super emotionally charged space to be in. I feel incredibly lucky. For those who don't know, the residencies on Governor's Island take place in houses where people used to live, like until not so very long ago. And there's like over 100 years of history written into the houses and everything. And it's funny because the hair pieces that I had been doing up until this residency that always use these domestic spaces, they were found photos. And starting this residency, I started taking my own photos and actually putting my body into it inside of the house, in all of these different spaces, and like trying to, but there's like a very different kind of charge to it, because in the pieces I was doing before that had like appliances and like furniture and everything, there was this like prescribed sort of like domestic space that was like already made and everything. And like inside of the house where that I'm using as my studio, there's like nothing. And so there's like they still very much read as these domestic spaces, but there's so much missing from them at the same time, that it's actually been, it's been really wild because they have so much history, but at the same time, they like are missing all this information that seems to be the stuff that actually like bogs us down and holds us in and everything. Like the toaster on the counter that you pass every single day. So yeah, so it's been, it's definitely caused me to think more about like what I'm responding to in those spaces. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because it closes the loop a bit on your work, because you're now like actually in that space. And these houses, it's one thing during normal times, when it's summer and there are shows happening, there's people moving through the spaces, and it's another thing when it's as a residency, and the island today is actually like the busiest I've seen it the entire time of the residency, and they're so quiet. It's eerie, and so they're almost like ghosts and shells of homes, where it's just like the people and the sort of the life and the spirit is like kind of there, but like without any. They're very strange in general. It's a strange space to work out in.
Yeah, and just shout out back to Calvin. Thank you for calling out that we are on Lenape land, and that we are coming up on Indigenous Peoples Day. It is strange to be in these colonizer houses that have this heavy military and like and governance like history to them, and now they've been repurposed for the you know, for like art making and to be open to different parts of the community. But now the people who visit the island still can't come in. There's these barriers, and like a lot of it is due to COVID, but it's still like, it has that kind of haunting to it too, of like, yeah, that there's still these forces that say like who gets to be in the house and like who doesn't. That I think is, yeah, also part of what had me like just want to like fill all of the space all over, because it just felt like it, yeah, there's so much room for spirits and energy in these like empty houses. It's crazy.
But you've been here for a lot longer than us too. You've been here since the summer, like June or July. So you
since mid-July.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it has been, but definitely a lot of time to like spend too much time thinking about the ethos of the place.
Yeah, it is very different to get on a ferry, get on the boat and come to the island, and you know, it's such a commitment getting here. And what's nice, what I find is really nice, is it creates a separation between like everything that happens out there. Like, I'm not even in Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan. It's like you're on Governor's Island, and it's just the way you work it's very different. Sometimes I find it hard to get into the flow just because of the hours, but then when I'm in it, I'm like, this is really lovely. And I'm not sure when the next time I'll be in a space that is like this enriching.
Yeah. It does something for like the study of subtle things, because when you're in the city and it's so packed, you like can't even feel yourself as much as out here. And then with the like vast emptiness of the home, you're just in there with yourself in a way that I think is really special.
And it's funny too to be like, if I'm working in a studio, it's usually like a dark enclosed space, no windows. So coming here, it feels like nature and green, and there's a breeze and the birds are chirping. And then the funny thing is, like, I feel like you're engaging in your work with the domestic environment, so it makes sense. You're like in here, there's like a feedback loop happening with it. I mean, if I was you and I was in that I would be like on the ground, just like
I do that some days. It's like this house is in my head, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like so much part of your work.
Yeah.
But I think for me at least, when I come here and I'm like, oh yeah, like nature, breeze, air, birds, squirrels. Sometimes I get freaked out. So I'm like, what was that noise? And I have to remember that there's a dance studio next to me, because I think, oh my God, these spaces are haunted. But then, like, what the other thing I'm getting at is that we're working with electronics. Like, we couldn't get more not natural. And then we're also like hooking them up to the body at the same time. So it's like a funny play of like beautiful nature. I mean, pseudo nature, right? Still like Manhattan and Brooklyn on both sides in a house. And then I'm like on a table soldering and putting like very, very man-made things together and hooking our bodies up to computers. So it's just kind of a funny situation. So I feel like we should talk about
Well, wait, because I have a question leading up to that.
Okay.
I put a lot of thought into my questions, so I want to ask them. So because you guys recently started collaborating, so it's like fresh and you're like feeling it out and everything. I think what's really striking is like how complementary your work is, where like Alex, like you use a lot of materials that are very soft and organic, and you put the human body, your body, like front and center, and you build on that by making external markers of like internal happenings and everything. And then like Joe, like your work is still like very much about like emotive machines, but in a way that uses technology and hardware and really like obscures the human body to focus on these like processes and everything. And I guess, so then I want to hear about what you're collaborating on right now and what you're wearing. You look divine. but also like what you respond to in each other's work and like how this collaboration kind of came together.
Do you want me or do you want to?
You can.
Okay. So it's funny, the island residency presented itself at a really perfect time for us, where we just started talking about collaboration, and we've known each other for probably about 2 years now, so we had just started talking about collaboration, just kind of, oh yeah, of course, there's this overlap between our work, not quite sure what it is, but let's sort of explore it for a little while. And so Alex has a lot of skill and a unique perspective that I just don't have access to. I don't do performance. I love performance. I love watching performance, and but it's not something I'm comfortable with, and it's not something that I want to direct on my own. I find it terrifying.
You directed this performance.
Yeah, look how well that's going. And so I think that so what we've been doing, or scratching the surface by doing a series of experiments. So we've got these electronics hooked up that we're hooked into, and we're using biosensors to try to find, sort of like dig into what that overlap could be. So what happens when we work with electronics, the body, and performance and emotion. And so we've got a couple different things. We're both, oh yeah, there's also the idea of synchronicity. So we're both wearing these funky things. So these are what's called galvanic skin response sensors. So they're what's used in lie detector tests, and they test the connectivity, the resistive flow of electricity through your body, and it's kind of linked to emotion. And so what we're doing is looking at the, what is it called again? The thing that's underneath.
Sympathetic state?
Yes, yeah, the sympathetic nervous system, which is a series of like glands that are underneath our skin. And as that changes, as we're talking, the color of the lights, and it's kind of washed out over here, but these colors are changing. So I'm talking a lot right now, and mine are yellow, and now I'm embarrassed, so they're red. And so all that's happening automatically. And then here,
this is my heartbeat.
Yeah.
It's hard to see. So that's my heartbeat at this moment. And so that's hooked up to my ear, and it's a way of externalizing how that might be better, how my heart, the rate that my heart is going. And so this is also this idea of us seeing like what happens when we can see our internal systems. And so it's kind of in some ways fusing together both the types of systems that we were looking at separately, the body system and the environmental system, and seeing how those things can influence each other, because also this system influences our body too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so very much interested in like feedback loops. I mean, that's what I was like, oh, it's a feedback loop. So it's like, what happens when you're aware of the internal states of your body? What happens if you can see and expose that? And then what happens if you're in a group with other people? Like if we're in a group, if everyone on Governor's Island were wearing these sensors, and we were all listening to the music, this lovely music playing right now. I don't think you guys can hear it, but there's some really nice folk music in the background. And if all those people were wearing some sort of like emotive biosensor, how does that change? Where are the moments where they sort of flicker together like fireflies, and when do they sort of dissipate? And so like I don't know what the collaboration is going to look like. I have no idea, but I mean, we're taking this residency and these sort of projects and these materials that we're working with, and we're using them as experiments to kind of try to dig through and see what comes out of it. And there's some fighting along the way, but we mostly get along.
Fighting's a good sign, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was good that you talked about this like towards the end, because I feel like otherwise like me and everyone else would just be watching the colors to be like, what are they feeling now?
Yeah.
Like, how does it feel to have your feelings out there?
It's
I mean, who knows? Like no.
What color is that?
I think it feels freeing in some ways though, because
you look free. You're just cool blue for like the last half an hour.
You don't have to the masks off, and that's like what those garments are about too, like the intuition of that coming out and not even knowing what it is, and then realizing what it is once you're in it. And I think that's something that we could benefit from, just letting it go and seeing it.
So we're making a bunch of devices to research our own emotions and see how they link together.
Fucking awesome. I can't wait to see it. Yeah.
We have like a minute. Do we have some?
Yeah, we're just about at time now, but I can't believe it took that long for everyone to notice what you guys were wearing. I'm like, when is this going to come up? Like, come on, I want to know.
It's the elephant in the room. We've been giggling the whole time about it, like school kids.
Can you also make them suspenders?
Do you want suspenders? I mean, I'm open to commissions.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that would be great. Yeah. I mean, these are wearable devices. We're trying to figure out what form they come in, what they mean, where they live.
Do you think suspenders would be what you'd most likely want to wear? Because we were thinking about that too. Like, what would be the most universal thing that we could get people in? And yesterday we were thinking about a scarf, but I'd be curious if suspenders would be.
I think more people wear scarves than suspenders, so you're probably right. But the way that it's cut, the way that you're framed right now, it kind of really.
Yeah. Oh my God.
We're holding up your.
I can't see it now. I can't unsee it.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. Well, thank you guys so very much. I wish that we could do this longer. This just flowed so wonderfully that it seemed like it was only 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Foreheads, NARS, Carol at Harvest Works. Thank you very much for giving us the space. The Trust for Governor's Island. This has been really, really
and
nice.
Beam Center, who's
Beam
a
Center.
partner, but also
so many
provider of Wi-Fi as well. So
that's like gold here.
All right. So thank you guys again, and please, continue to talk together and do things together, and then apply to the art fair together or something. You know?
Love the art fair.
Let's fingers crossed about next year. So
I know.
Yeah, right. I'm sure it will. We can all be together soon and hug. So guys, I really appreciate everything. And coming up next is going to be Jamila McEvan and Elizabeth Demare. Jamila is from the Virtual Volcano Observatory, and Elizabeth is from Swell. And we're going to hear from them real soon. In the meantime, I'm going to play a video for you. It's a recap of last year's Portal Governor's Island, formerly known as Governor's Island Art Fair. And I see some attendees in here that are in the video. John Burren is actually, he's in a very integral part of the video whenever the music switches. So I'm going to put that on. And we'll be about 10 minutes. So we'll see you real soon. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Hey, hi. Cool. And I'm kind of short. Can I put it on the regular table? Nice. Okay, cool. Hey, testing 1, 2, 3. That's what I'm supposed to say. Hi, testing 1, 2, 3. Huh. I don't know. Let's see. I should be able to see it, right? I think grid view is only 2.
Well, because he's sharing the screen, but that's okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. You guys, can you talk to each other?
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not getting anything either. We could just shout. Oh, okay.
You guys can obviously hear each other from.
Oh, I can hear now.
Oh, you can now. Good.
I can now, yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
We
That's
can hear
better.
both of you.
Cool.
Okay.
So, all right. All right, and so the only thing you should just keep in mind is when you're not talking, just mute to speak.
Okay.
And, vice versa, just to keep any audio from like unnecessarily being sent over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all.
Okay.
It's just that I'm so short. I have to sit on the edge of the chair.
Some slight, zoom delay through your headphones.
Okay.
This is
the nature.
this is funny.
Just remember, mute, unmute, speak.
Okay.
That should be good. Tell her, unmute. Just try to remember to feedback from the last week. Okay. Everything looks good. Are we in charge?
So strange to have a Zoom. I feel like I want to look at your. So there's this weird thing with these screens, right, where you can't actually make eye contact with the person. But so I might, rather than looking at the screen, I might look at you. Okay, just so you know, because it's definitely more
I
comfortable.
actually thought we were going to get to sit side by side.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Two people, yeah.
I think they must have been collaborators. It's really weird.
Or quarantine partners.
Or quarantine partners, true. I feel like I was overhearing what you were talking about, but maybe they want us to save that for when we're going. Are we going now? Is this started? I'm so
Yes,
confused.
we are started.
Oh, I didn't know that. No one had said we're live. There's audience.
Yeah. Well, I put you guys both on mute before, but to test, you guys had to go off of mute. So we're started. But it's okay. Like, it's just very casual.
Okay, great.
So welcome back, everyone. We are in our third and last of the talks of today, of the artist talks today. We have Jamila, and Jamila has shown with us at least once in the past, up in an attic. That was an amazing black room high up in the sky where you were just like drenched in sweat every day. I remember the sweaty bit, as installed for the art fair is very sweaty. And then Elizabeth is joining us, and I only know your work through your video, and I really love the video. So thank you so much. So welcome to both of you. Jamila is from the Virtual Volcano Observatory, their residency, and Elizabeth is from Swale. And I believe you guys are like next door neighbors, kind of, right?
Yep.
Excellent.
Pretty much, but we haven't, this is the first time we've seen each other physically.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's great. That's wonderful. So just to fill everybody in who's joining us now, we are going to show 2 videos, one of each of the artists that will be talking later. Then the artists will talk. You can ask questions and just, you know, put it in the Q&A or the chat, whichever way. And if the artist will look at them, if they don't see them, I'll bring them up, but they usually, you know, see them. So I'm going to show, we'll see which one I'm going to show first. I don't know. You know, it's been really funny lately with the videos, because I will click on one and the other one will start playing.
So hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Demare, and I do unusual things, I suppose. I knit sweaters for plants. I design and fabricate alternative forms of housing for land hermit crabs. I make these things called floorboards, which are entities that are part plant and part robot. This is an AI system that allows potted plants to freely navigate in a domestic environment in search of sunlight and water. And I also make this thing, actually I did this on Governor's Island, called a plastomatch. Plastomatch is a stomach that can actually eat plastic by virtue of living fungi. So I'm really interested in pairing with our companion species to do things, often in a biotope, which is a small environment shared by multiple species, often including humans. I'm also interested in this thing called trans-species giving, which is this idea that the commonalities that exist between living organisms are such that we might be able to be of assistance to another life form. And I'm also interested in something called non-anthropocentric design, which is design that attempts to consider the aims, desires, and perceptual landscapes of the non-human. So in this vein, I culture lichen on the sides of skyscrapers. We can talk more about lichen. This is a picture of a project called Lichen for Skyscrapers, where I actually taught people how to make their own lichen slurry to culture lichen on the sides of buildings. This project is actually happening right now at ISEA, which is the International Symposium of Electronic Arts in Montreal. And it's called Pandora Bird. I'm interested in how to use technology, human technology, to support our non-human companion species. In this case, this particular system uses a little Raspberry Pi computer, and it plays music for birds. Catbirds, mockingbirds in our area, and the lyrebird in Australia have all been documented to pay a lot of attention to human music. Lyrebird actually learns human songs and teaches it to successive generations of its offspring. So I'm making these things called listening stations for birds, and each one plays a different genre of human music. So yeah, tune into Isaiah, the October the 13th through the 20th, and you can watch this system playing. It's a high resolution image from the Raspberry Pi. And this is an image of the system being installed on Swale over in Brooklyn Bridge Park. Yeah, so also plasto matches. I'm really interested in how to create larger habitats for our non-human companion species. In this case, white rot fungi that actually eats plastic by virtue of enzymes. So this is a potential solution for your own personal plastic consumption. You may be able to make one of these for your own home. It's called a plaster match. And this is a picture of its progressive growing on Governor's Island at Swale House last summer. This is another project I'm currently doing with the ant scientist Amy Savage. She showed that pavement ants that live in cities are actually grouchier and potentially more aggressive than their country-dwelling cousins of the same species. So we're making ant feeding stations that can go on these medians in the middle of cities, so that the people that live in the vicinity of the median can potentially augment these ants. The ants that live on this median, that humans can potentially augment their diet with small amounts of protein and fat. And this last project, I'm actually also an artist in residence at the World Trade. That's my studio. It's fancy. I'm on the 70th floor. It's very nice. And I get to look down on all these other modernist buildings. So I'm proposing a project called the Manhattan Tundra Project, which uses these unutilized spaces that humans can't go to put 6 to 8 inches of topsoil in order to create emergent ecosystems. And once again, these are supported by computer vision. So we're going to put a little webcam on the top of these. So all the people that are stuck in the buildings can log on and see whatever is growing on the top of their building. So I'm working on these and other projects over at Swell House, and I am so looking forward to our discussion. It's been a pleasure to meet you guys. Bye, everyone. And those are my websites. Ciao.
Hey, guys. Wow, that was amazing. And you guys are so well matched for this talk. And we have a fellow forehead artist who is a fungi nut. We went to go visit her not too long ago, and we went foraging for mushrooms in the Catskills. And she knows a lot about. So she's going to be chiming in with some questions. I believe. Oh, actually, sorry, she's not. She's totally not. I just got a text. She blew us off, but hopefully she's educated me maybe enough that I can ask some intelligent questions if we have enough time for that. Okay, so we are going to switch over to Jamila's Dead Gods, and we'll be right back to talk after we see.
This summer on Governor's Island, I've been developing a new monumental living earthwork called Dead Gods. Dead Gods honours the prehistoric mushrooms that play a significant role in the origin of life on Earth as sacred ancestral deities. In a moment when we are collectively grappling with the likelihood that 1 million species will become extinct within decades, I am thinking about an ancient terrestrial fungi that gave rise to the vast diversity of plant and animal species that exist today. The impact of mycelium as one of the greatest shapers of the living world can be seen enmeshed through all ecosystems on our planet. During past extinction epochs that occurred through dramatic atmospheric changes that darkened the skies, mycelium acted as a life raft species, as mycelium are one of the few life forms that do not require sunlight to survive. Perhaps even more profound is the way early plants and their fungal partners changed our atmosphere over deep time, lowering carbon dioxide and increasing oxygen composition, a legacy that supports us today. Dead Gods will pay tribute to a specific prehistoric fungal life form called the Prototaxidae. Prototaxides lived 460 million years ago and were, at that time, the largest living organism on land. These totem-like giants, known to have grown 30 feet tall, dominated the cerulean landscape. Dead Gods ennobles the Prototaxides, celebrating them as deities of life on this planet. This summer, we began growing full-scale living experiments for Dead Gods from reishi and oyster mushrooms, modern-day mycelium descendants of the ancient fungi giants. Reminiscent of a science fiction narrative, in reanimating these now extinct life forms, I examine the utopic desire to reverse the inevitable process of extinction. To meet the challenges of the Holocene extinction, we need to extend our imagination of ancestry beyond the human narrative and recognize our place as co-collaborators in the story of life on Earth.
Amazing. We found in our foraging up in the Catskills, those transparent flowers that you have in there. Absolutely amazing. It was like what I was.
What are they called? Ghost. They have I forget their name, but yeah, they're medicinal. They're used medicinally, right?
Our friend was supposed to be on to answer that. But yeah, it was absolutely I mean, breathtaking that like this is just growing out of dirt. Like this is absolutely amazing. But enough of me. I'm going to get out of your guys' hair and let you guys speak. And I will be chiming in later, maybe with questions, but probably not. Probably I'll just shut up. All right, take care, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, I feel like we have an overwhelming amount in common. Very much kin in terms of how we're thinking about, really extending our thinking outside of the human. And I guess I don't even have questions at this point because I don't know. It's all feelings. Do you have questions?
I'm gonna unmute. Well, I mean, I have to tell you, that plasto match was across the way at Swale House for most of last summer, and it was delicate. It was hard to keep it alive. It was hard to keep bacteria out. It was oyster mushrooms that we were using. It was live and open to the public, so people were bringing their plastic debris, and we were doing these cooking demos to show people how to like clean it, to feed it to the fungi. And it was tough. I mean, it was hard to keep this life form alive. So I mean, I'm so excited to see your pieces. But as I look at that, it's the undertaking to use that as, I mean, is it sort of like the tensile strength component, or are those how much of the form is fungi that for the vertical pieces?
Okay, yeah. So we're going to dive into the technical aspects of it. Yes, anyone that has worked cultivating mushrooms has a deep appreciation for delving into, to me, the thing, you describing the bacteria, all of this, I feel like I had this world open to me of this primeval, endless battle and collaboration between mycelium and bacteria, and some of the bacteria helps fight other bacteria that will. It's deeply humbling, and for me, I think I've had to lean very much on my spiritually animistic self, so that I don't consider myself too heavily in service to them, but we are working together, and that ultimately this is their vision, is to tell their story about where they came from. And so I'm trusting them that they want this. So that's how I keep grounded in a technically difficult project on a spiritual level. On a technical level, it's been a steep learning curve. I've never worked with mycelium before. The molds that you saw, we weren't able to achieve that full scale this summer. Also, I'm learning about the properties of oyster mushrooms versus reishi. Reishi is much stronger. Oyster is so excitable and robust at the beginning, and then it weakens, and I'm learning it ages, like the way that it ages and becomes weak, and fruits and loses strength after fruiting. Yeah. And it's I feel the longer I work with it, the more I empathize with it and I stress about it a lot. So I think I've had to adapt what the plan of action is each time. They aren't entirely self-supporting. There is actually on the inside a not particularly strong chicken wire frame inside, and that is also so that they get oxygen
So, you know,
Oh,
if you
good
try
point.
to
Yeah.
keep those
Yeah.
objects solid,
Right.
they would struggle to get enough oxygen and airflow into the inside. So it was less for strength and more to get more of that hyphae growing. Yeah, I don't know. I would actually be interested to show you what state they're in currently, because I'm nervous about them right now.
I hate to be a mycelium here, but can you guys mute yourselves whenever you're not speaking, because we're getting tons of echo. If we could. Thank you. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, that's tricky. So, but I think anytime that I, as an artist, I'm going to delve into this more than human world, it's not necessary, you know, it's not my intention. And I know that this is also a tendency for us to think this way. It's not my intention. And I need to also remind myself it's not my intention to control or master these material or these living entities, or even sometimes I'm working with non-living but transforming entities, and to trust that they will tell me what their limits are and that I just have to keep up. So I am curious how over the summer when you were doing the plastic eating stomach, how was that as an emotional ride for you?
Honestly, it was so challenging. I don't think I had time to think about my emotions. I was really fortunate because over at Swell House last summer, there were a bunch of, there was a number of mycelium aficionados that were doing another project in the living room. And it was just enormously helpful to have them present. Interesting, I mean, it felt almost like we were figuring out stuff in real time. One of the issues with feeding plastic to fungi is that fungi is a hyperaccumulator. So if you're attempting, so initially the idea, I mean, I've been trying to think about ways of and by the way, I'm a sculptor, but somehow in the past 10 years, these things that I used to do that used to be considered sort of, you know, quixotic art kinds of activities, I'm still doing the same things I always did. Now they're considered, you know, speculative design, right? Because of the backdrop of where we are, you know, this moment in our evolution, you know, on Earth. So so it's funny because I come at things from a very like I'm making an art piece. And yet I find that when I'm working in these kinds of veins, there are so many other areas that become engaged. You know, like artists, like we have crazy ideas, right? That's, you know, I Solowitz, you know, he did this wonderful 25 sentences on conceptual art. And in sentence 2, he says, rational ideas beget rational experience, irrational ideas lead to new experience. So I've been finding, like, I'll have these irrational ideas, right? And I'll make something and it'll lead to these areas that are, that start to engage things like design or, you know, different areas of science. So it's a really kind of a strange space for me to be in. And one of the things that happened at Swell House last summer is I was sort of trying to figure out how to make a space for these life forms. I wanted to sort of invite them into the domestic space. And a good friend of mine named John Dighton, his laboratory had been doing work on training fungi to eat plastic. And it doesn't really like to eat plastic. It will. Interestingly enough, it appears, there's a number of scientists that indicate that it may be evolving, right? Lots of things are evolving into these spaces to eat and consume and otherwise engage, you know, our footprint. And so I was feeding, so I knew that the fungi could do this, and I wanted to invite it into our space, and I was considering, you know, the degree to which you might be able, for example, to make a plaster match and put it in your, your recycling area and feed it. And so we were kind of thinking about this like living entity that came to live with us that we would be feeding. But what happened was it engaged all of these other areas. So there were people that were really interested in mycelium, and they would be doing things like making, paper making workshops in the living room, like how to take mycelium and make paper out of it. And I would be worried because I was growing this form that was a hyperaccumulator. And I was thinking to myself, well, I mean, this feels like almost like a dead end because I'm feeding them. They're eating our plastic, but once they grow, they've accumulated metals and dyes. And then the people in the living room were like, oh no, Elizabeth, we can make paper out of your, plaster match. And then the other part of me was like, like my living being, like it's a living being, right? And so then there's a whole nother level of like how I'm interacting with it. So I don't know if I had time to like kind of spiritually engage it, but I did find that it kind of became like the heart of the house, like people would visit it, people would bring it plastic. We would have these sort of almost kinds of like rituals where we would sit around and share with each other the plastic debris that we had made. And then we would sort of ritualistically clean it and cut it into little pieces to feed it. So it kind of took on a life of its own. And I kind of felt like I was sort of along for the ride, kind of. But yeah, so I'm actually more interested in hearing your spirit, what you have found out spiritually, because I don't think I had time to engage it on that level.
So I guess when I was thinking about your project of having the mycelium eat the plastic, I was thinking it's actually very interesting to hear you say that these organisms are evolving in terms of their diet is adapting. I think to consider putting mycelium in service to our waste disposal feels, I guess, like morally disturbing. And I was thinking, and I wondered if while you were doing that, if it engaged people's conversations about, because let's face it, it's not, plastic is in the food chain. So it's a conversation about how plastic is in the food chain, right? Like it's in the fish, it's in the cattle, it's in us. So we are also ingesting, digesting plastic. So it is interesting because it's not even that, on some level, it's not even that you are setting up a scenario for mycelium to eat plastic, but you're also giving a living demonstration about how, and I've become really quite fascinated, like the work that I've been thinking about for a while has been very much about extinction, which, I can't help not drawing plastic all the way back to its, its ancestral, it's the ancestral body and graveyard of our planet. So it's interesting that we're eating that, so
I'll unmute for a second. So I know exactly what you mean. The interesting thing is that all of us are getting moved off of our, quote unquote, natural diets. Like we're all getting sort of shifted. And you do find mycelium eating plastic out in, I don't want to say, out in the big wide world. The carbon chains in plastic look a lot like the carbon chains in wood. So it might prefer sawdust. It might prefer sawdust that's been, that has maybe been purified in one way or another. But out in the big wide world, you're not necessarily going to be, the fungi is not going to necessarily be able to find, nice autoclaved sawdust to eat. It's interesting to me, though. I was thinking, and I'm really interested in this idea of darkness. One of the things that led to this piece, I retitle books. Like I just take books and scratch out the titles and write in new titles. And volcanoes. There's a book that I wrote called Life on a Few Extinct Volcanoes that actually reminded me your residency. I was like, oh my God, it's a volcano. It's awesome. But there's a book that I retitled, and it was called Diet for a Dark Planet. And climate scientists think that the scenario as our planet becomes warmer is that the rainforests are going to dry up, which is our carbon sinks, and they're going to burn. And if they burn, it's going to blacken out the sky. And what will we have when the sky is dark? So it's called the cookbook for when the sun goes out. And what are those things that are going to be with us when the sun goes out? And fungi is extraordinary just because exactly what you said, it can use radiation in the same way that plants can utilize sunlight to make chemical energy. So I was actually thinking about this situation where everything is dark, right? And what do we have? Lichen actually is really interesting that way too, because it's a combination of fungi and algae. It can also use radiation instead of sunlight. So I mean, there's all of these amazing life forms that can continue. And there's other energy sources, there's the vents at the bottom of the ocean. There's other sources of energy, but I thought that was particularly interesting that you were also thinking about this idea of darkness, of these life forms that are able to sort of exist in these conditions that are almost unthinkable and yet possible at the same time.
With a helicopter, which is highly distracting, going overhead. Yeah, I mean, I feel like also as artists that are thinking about extinction, thinking about, we have to look at, we're looking at the stories that were being told about the future through science. And on one hand, keeping this level head where we're somehow, there's something that feels like psychopathic about even like sort of entertaining this idea, but that's sort of and enjoying being curious about it somehow feels sadistic, but also that's also weirdly our job as artists. And I feel sometimes wildly slung between talking about things that are very dark in a way that seems almost joyful and sometimes really submitting to the despair of it. And I think that I need to feel that spectrum so that I know that like basically my whole humanity is fully engaged in the project, in the process. And since we're on lichens, I also just want to I also want to bring awareness that the prototaxides were actually technically a lichen. So they are a fungal body, but they're actually a lichen. And that is the reason that I'm really, I'm always wondering about why am I being asked to tell this story of the prototaxides? Because it came very intuitively through me, through ceramics, through volcanoes actually, into this. So I think that the story comes to me and somehow I'm put in charge of telling the story, and I have to work out why it's important. And why I think it's important is there is something in that brilliant collaboration that created lichen that only happened through the most difficult of conditions to live, the most difficult conditions for life. And they created this, the prototaxides are this insane experiment in terms of, and life conducts these experiments. And to me, it's an insane experiment because it puts all of the fungi above ground. And fungi is, as you know, such a sensitive and not, you know, it grows these mushrooms, blooms, but really the fungal body above ground just doesn't make sense because it's so susceptible to attack. And this is, you know, one of the theories of how it went extinct, was that it became this massive food source and allowed other things to evolve and eat it. But, you know, now we see the inversion of that experiment. So the fungi exists as a mass under the surface, and that now has access to all of those minerals that it wants to break down. It's closer to its kind of mineral source, and then, you know, in turn capable of creating this incredible relationship with trees. So that story of how we got here is just to do with collaboration, and collaboration in this point of adversity. And I mean, they work together because they had just enough in common and just enough not in common to work together. And I think that that's kind of maybe that's the metaphor that we need right now. You know, this is what we need to learn as human beings, is that we actually need the diversity amongst us to work together and not rip apart. And I don't know, I think our survival depends on it.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, yeah, the other thing that well, there's so many. I was like, I could have taken notes while you were writing just now, or you were talking just now. Yeah, I mean, living things are, you know, climate scientists say that if every human being went out and planted 6 trees, we wouldn't have an issue with global warming anymore. You know, the dependency, the degree to which we're dependent on all of these extraordinary companion species is just, I mean, I feel, you know, it's just, it's profound. And the other thing that you know, forgive me, I'm always, you know, it's funny, humor. George Bernard Shaw once said that humor was the poor man's weapon. And there is something that is very humorous to me about the way that we interact with the natural world. The sort of, you know, and I don't necessarily want to say it's just a phenomena of Western culture, but this idea, you know, that something is a quote unquote resource, like a natural resource, right? Like it's a resource. It just, I find our cultural interactions with nature humorous. And I have a tendency to use a lot of humor in my work. And I've noticed, especially maybe, you know, when I remember E.O. Wilson wrote that book about the massive species die-off a while ago, I forget, maybe 10 years ago now or something like that. And I was doing a work about that and giving a lecture in Amsterdam. And I just kind of casually mentioned it because it was, whoa, somebody just yelled really loudly in the background. I don't know, I hope it's fun, whatever that was. I hope that was a fun yell. But I found myself on a stage, and I realized, I looked out at the audience and they all looked really sad. And somebody raised their hand and asked about it. And I realized that nobody there had been aware that, you know, by the end of this century, we're going to lose 50% of every living species on Earth. That's if we continue with our current rate of ecological destruction. And, you know, so I was doing this humorous work, which is great because, well, it's how I speak, but it's also nice because can be a segue for people who don't necessarily want to look at things that are very dark, who don't necessarily want to be aware of some of the things that you know that I think a lot of artists are talking about and thinking about and engaging right now. But it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I found myself standing on the stage and I looked out at these people that looked so sad, and I started crying, and then they started crying. And I think that sometimes I use humor because if I don't, I'm going to cry. You know, like it's almost the only way that I can actually engage some of the subject matter. So I don't want you to think that I'm being blithe, but I think it's a coping mechanism more than anything. But there was something else I wanted to say about living things. It was trees or fungi. One of the things I'm seeing right now is that we are having this kind of extraordinary explosion in terms of our technological capabilities, genomic engineering, AI. People are able to model, the scientists are starting to look a little bit more like artists. Pure science is becoming applied science, right? They're all making things. And I feel like right at this moment, we are learning so much about the natural world that we did not know. Just extraordinary things. And it almost feels like maybe it's a little late, right? Like maybe, we are, maybe that is one of the reasons that people are working so hard right now. But like that floorboard piece, remember those plants that are part robot? That's an AI piece. And initially, in order to create, that's based on the work of Italian Australian cyberneticist by the name of Valentino Brattenberg. And he made these simple systems called Brattenberg vehicles, which are like simple neurological systems for avoidance and attraction. So I was going to make these, and I ended up having to use Arduino and to do a lot of programming. And then it became an AI system so it could start learning. And then I realized that I was working on creating basically a cyber physical system to better communicate with plants. Why am I telling you this? Oh, the interesting thing is that nobody has ever actually spent a lot of time looking at plant signaling, right? Like here we are, surrounded by these things that are, completely supporting our own existence, and yet we have no idea how they signal to each other. So we started doing very simple work. I wrote this massive NSF grant to create a cyber physical system to better communicate with plants. And it turns out that nobody had ever done enough, that there wasn't enough entry-level work in that area to support getting this big grant. We may still get it, who knows? But I'm just amazed by everything that we don't know. At this point, I am so amazed by what we don't know. And I really think that artists are sort of blazing a trail in these areas. I don't know, I'm just curious. Are you finding that, do you feel like there's all these sorts of things that we should know, but we don't? And are you finding that through your work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, also I feel that there are a lot of things that we know, but not scientifically. There's a lot of questions coming to science that have existed as knowledge systems, indigenous knowledge systems, that then get co-opted into scientific questions. And then we have this thing where we go, science has proved that, and very rarely is credit given that was already known. It was already known by a totally different system of knowledge. And I mean, speaking the truth has become something that has become such a practice that has required very deep listening on my part. And I'm finding that my version of what I know the truth to be and is a lot stranger than what I've been told how the world operates. So when I'm talking about this, empathetic zone between me and the mycelium that I'm working with, I realize that that's part of already what I am, that already exists. And I feel also kind of dumb in this way where I go, oh, I think the mycelium already knew that. They already knew how capable I was. And they knew, they were already signaling me, but I don't know how. And then I'm like, oh, I do know how. It's just because we have this incredible faculty, which, even just this point where we start to acknowledge that the brain and the body are not separate, like that feels bizarrely recent. You're like, of course they're not bloody separate. Like they are. And I'm like, oh, because I can sense with so much more than what I've been taught to sense with. And yeah, I don't know. And it is frustrating because you go, okay, I actually think we do know these things, and this grant that you're doing, we do have enough actually. We just don't have it written down. We don't have it published, and we don't have it qualified. So it feels slow. And if this is like this lumping bureaucracy kind of situation that artists are always like, no, it's like, it seems really obvious to us, but we also get to move really rapidly, I guess, through this. And so I think that's how I feel about that. I feel anxious a lot of the time about telling the truth, actually, about telling, especially when it comes to, and I think it's because I know that it matters a lot. And we have to work out how to tell the truth. So when you're talking about humor, I hear you entirely on that. And when I'm at my darkest, that's when I make memes. I don't publish, I don't have a meme account, but it's my way of dealing, where I'm just like, this is so screwed up that it is funny. It's funny. It has to be funny. And there's, we know there's wisdom and enlightenment and all of that, but I'm always just going, okay, whatever emotion is coming up through this, it's part of the intelligence, it's part of the faculty. And sometimes I feel like what I have to do as my job as an artist, because I think actually I'm surrounded by scientists. My partner is a scientist. My dad is a scientist. So I have this appreciation for how painfully slow science is. So I kind of actually keep my distance from it a little bit. But I feel like emotions can be very slow, or they can be very fast. And part of what I think my job is to think about when we're receiving this information, what is it doing to us emotionally, and how can I drag my fellow species through the emotional transformation that they're going to need to get to wherever we're going to next. I don't know what the next is, but I just know that my job is the emotional part.
I feel like the next is a much greater level of empathy with everything that's alive. I really and I feel like it's happening. I feel like definitely there's a shift going on. I mean, a lot of it has to do with just the terror of what's to come. I think that's probably part of it. But I have a question for you. I'm giving a talk in like a week or two in a symposium on non-anthropocentric design, and I'm really interested in. I mean, there's a lot of artists that are sort of working a little like how scientists are working, maybe sort of, but what we're learning is different. What we're learning is different, and the model is different. The simple, the takeaways are different. Could you elaborate on what your takeaways are, and how that might be different than somebody who might be, say, studying this life form rather than pairing with it?
So I think I think the main differences between what I kind of understand how science is applied is it's kind of this subtle line of where the idea of science is somehow like objectivity, and and we know that the observed is changed through observation. So if we know that, then I'm in a different zone, which is somewhere in the animistic zone, where I'm trying not to interfere with my understanding of whatever I'm looking at, its subjectivity, by imposing my own subjectivity onto it. So in this funny way, there's this parallel, but I'm trying to be taught by whatever entity it is that I'm collaborating with, and I'm trying to listen really hard and trying to shut out whatever it is, my own ambitions and and desires from it. So there is this parallel where you're just simply trying to gain knowledge, but it is different because what I'm doing, the way I do that is to bring online also not siloing off whatever it is, understanding that it's part of a community and that I'm not the only one that when I'm dealing with mycelium, it's in community with everything. And so it's humbling because I think that in a way we need to learn how to be more mycelial in that way, because I think mycelium have spent so long understanding everything that they collaborate with. And we are being somewhat shit at that. Like, I mean, we're sorry to, but we.
You're allowed to swear as much as you want.
I don't, it's funny. I feel like I'm on radio or something. I'm not allowed to swear. I normally swear a lot, but
whatever you want to say, you can say.
That's where I'm at. But I also.
You need to wrap it up.
Okay. So my response would be that I just think that we need to bring it all online all at once. So we need the scientific imagination to expand into the spaces that artists are feeling into. I think they'll ask better questions. I think we need scientists to acknowledge where they've been biased and where they have and who they've been serving in their research. And we know this. And I think artists have been trying to hold them accountable to that for a long time. But it takes courage. But anyway, I just want to say this has been a great conversation, and we could literally do this for about 4 hours, I think.
But I
have a weekly radio show.
I really hope that you will. I mean, this is like a podcast right here. This is like science versus, if you put art in it, like science versus this versus art.
Wait, am I muted? I'm muted. That's one of the other things that I see like a lot in Western culture is this idea of like a dichotomy, like it's either that or it's this. And one of the other things that I think is interesting, like with science, is like there's this idea of categories. Like you're trying to figure out, you're creating factual knowledge, so you've got these like categories that you're trying to fill. And it's just been interesting for me to like pair with the non-human in a less in a format that's more like, it's almost like a friendship rather than like a study. And because of that, you get non-anthropocentric kinds of information, like information that maybe isn't that helpful for us humans to know. So I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that. And by the way, I might use you as an example. I've been really interested in the idea of the artist and the other, right? How do we engage the other? And as humans, I mean, our capabilities are so extensive, and I mean, in some ways, maybe we haven't really had to really, deeply engage with the things around us, simply because our capabilities, are like you said, they're quite, at least we think they're quite extensive, I think that the more that we learn about the life forms around us, the more we'll realize that our capabilities are very unique and different, and perhaps we'll have a little bit more what's the right word, respect for the other. Yeah.
Thank you both. I mean, this was one of the, I think, probably the most substantive talks that we've done. And it kind of happened a little bit last minute, and it kind of by accident, like a little bit by accident, I mean, it was by design, but it was very last minute by design. So there was an element of accident involved in it. But I really hope that you guys talk together more and collaborate more, because I wrote 25 notes about what I wanted to ask you about. I'm not going to ask you about any of them because there's not enough time. Thank you. Thank you so goddamn much. I really appreciate the conversation. Wait, you're both.
Post your questions or send them. It'd be lovely to see.
Yeah, put it,
Yeah.
email us.
Oh, and also I'm going to be out front trying to run the damn Pandora system with 3 different genres of human music over the course of the next week. So guys, come on out and visit. I'm out front. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Jazz hands.
There's it's a you know, it's open. There's
Okay.
people there. There's people doing things there. There's live things happening. You can't go in people's houses, but you know, that's about it. There's things going on. So if you want to, go to Governor's Island.
Oh, lovely.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. And everyone, next week. So, just to recap, that was Jamila McEwen and Elizabeth Demare. Jamila is with the Virtual Volcano Observatory, and Elizabeth is with Swell. Next week, we have Shannon Finnegan from Beam Center, Valerie Heller from Harvest Works. I think that she might be on this Zoom. Tim Fight, Foreheads, and Zeli Brown. He's from Swell as well. And Tim and Zeli know each other, so I think that that's going to be an interesting talk. And Julie Ann Nagel and Simone Johnson. Julie is from Swell and Simone is from Works and Water. And that's our lineup for next week. And I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And I recognize a lot of the names on the attendee list, and I really do appreciate it. So I hope you're back next week and see you then, and I'll hopefully be wearing the same sport jacket. Take care, guys.